Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here because my journey started here. That's about 15 years ago. After I finished my undergrad, and I saw this agricultural magazine, and how the livestock on that page, the pages of the magazine, was different from what we had in Nigeria. And so I asked my professor what the difference is, what I'm seeing on ground and what's on the magazine. And he said to me that these ones have been genetically improved. So that was what sparked my interest. How is it done? And so in trying to understand how it's done, I landed here, University of Edinburgh, where I did my master's. And then I've gone on my journey. And 15 years after, I'm standing in front of you, about to, tackle with my team at ILRI, beginning to address some of these challenges that I saw 15 years ago. So I feel a lot of gratitude, especially also because the scholarship that brought me here, I didn't even apply for. That's a whole story on its own. But I was given and I almost lost it, but I'm grateful that I got the chance and here now beginning to address those challenges that bothered me 15 years ago. All right, so we'll start with, my name, already, Chinyere Ekine-Dzivenu, but this is on behalf of our team, Livestock Genetics team at the International Livestock Research Institute. But I also want to say thank you to the Highlander Lab for bringing me here. Yes, they made this possible, so I'm really very grateful for that. And so this afternoon, we'll be talking about Girth tracking, a novel, practical, and low-cost tool for assessing climate resilience in resource-limited settings. And the outline of my talk will just be taking you through an introduction, a brief one, and then the objective of the study, how data was collected, analyzed, and then we'll look at the results and the implication, but also the broader application of the results that we're finding from this research. And this is really the first time that this sort of work is done in sub-Saharan Africa. And it's really fresh from the oven. So, so demand for meat, milk, so livestock-derived foods is increasing, and it's fastest in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is not driven by overconsumption, but by population growth, rising income, and urbanization. And by 2050, Africa's population would have doubled, with a significant proportion of that population being young people. That's another interesting fact is that this demand is met by mostly smallholder farmers in this setting. And with the threats from climate change, they're going to be the ones to experience or be most affected by it if we do nothing to address the threats of climate change. The frequency and the severity of these events are expected to increase, and we're seeing it already. So we need to, in our system, define adaptive strategies, including breeding for resilient cattle, to mitigate the impact of climate change on the smallholder production system, but even larger. And on top of this is that there's scarcity of studies, resilience studies. Those are really emerging right now in the world. But we have a paucity or scarcity of those kind of studies in sub-Saharan Africa because largely there is a lack of systematic way of collecting data, production data at herd level. But recently, Richard, I think he was here a few weeks ago, he did a study on using milk variability to assess resilience in smallholder farms. However, it will be difficult for farmers to track milk as a measure for resilience. But there is an alternative. And so here today we're talking about hard gut measures, which reflects growth patterns as a resilience indicator. And it's cheap, it's practical, it's simple, and it's quick. And again, like I said earlier, it's easier for farmers to track resilience using the hard gut than using milk. So the objective of this study really is to analyze individual cattle hard gut profile as a resilience indicator. Now, this is based on the premise that cattle are consistently exposed to unpredictable disturbances, which causes variations in frequently measured traits. And cows exhibiting fewer fluctuations are considered as more resilient than those that have larger variability or higher variability. As a result, the patterns of these fluctuations could serve as an indicator for resilience. So what we've done here is to estimate heritability of hard gut variability and assess the genetic and phenotypic correlations between hard gut variability and growth. So data for this study was collected within the African Asian Dairy Genetics Gain Project. This project was launched in 2016 to address challenges facing smallholder livestock systems in Africa through innovative application of ICT and genomic technology. The focus really is on advancing genetic improvement with the goal of increasing profitability, productivity, resilience, and ensuring sustainability of the dairy production in resource-limited settings. Hard gut measure for each cow was measured monthly using the hard gut tape. Measuring tape was placed around the chest circumference just behind the front leg, like you see there. Data was collected between 2020 and 2025. About 50,000 hard gut measures for cows aged between 0 and 36 months, and about population size of 3,500. Outliers were removed, and at least 8 records for each animal. Each animal had to have 8 records to be allowed into this evaluation. And fixed effects included month and year of measurement, breed as declared by the farmer, and administrative region of the country. So data was analyzed in 4 steps. The first was individual growth curves modeled using generalized additive mix model with splines implemented in R using the MGCV package. And from that model, residuals were taken and standardized. And then this standard deviation, residuals was taken from this model, and standard deviations of residuals calculated. So this is a single summary statistic that indicates the variability of an animal's data point around its growth trajectory. Heritability of residual standard deviation after resilience indicator was estimated using a univariate animal model with a 9-generation pedigree. A genetic and phenotypic correlations between resilience indicator and hard gut was estimated using a bivariate animal model, because, well, we want to select for resilient animals, but also not compromise on growth. So residual standard deviations range from 0.20, so most stable, to 18.51, least stable. As you can see on the chart there, the first animal was really very close. Variations were very close to the predicted trajectory, whilst for the other animal, we could see a larger variation, deviation from the predicted curve. Heritability for residual standard deviation as a trait for resilience was low to moderate, 0.27, suggesting the presence of genetic variation, indicating that hard gut variability could serve as a cost-effective resilience indicator in resource-limited production systems, supporting breeding, but also management strategies. Estimated genetic and phenotypic correlations were low, and this suggests that selecting for resilience will not negatively impact growth such that both can be improved simultaneously. There is a broader application for this. As climate variability increases, the ability of cattle to maintain its body mass is critical. So by monitoring growth with the hardgut tape and a chart, pastoralists and other livestock keepers in our system can identify animals that perform well under these challenging conditions for breeding to build more resilient herds. But also, this tool, a hardgut tape and a chart, can serve as early warning, especially when we have those weather events, droughts, and they can signify a decline in growth reflected by smaller hardguts, and showing poor pasture, prompting intervention by the farmer. So maybe some supplementary feeding might be appropriate, or moving livestock to better grazing areas, or even destocking to save his enterprise. So this is the population level growth curve for this for the population used in this analysis. And at ILRI, we have the index-based livestock insurance, and this is was developed by ILRI and partners to mitigate the risk livestock losses suffered mostly by pastoralists. And so this works by a trigger, which a trigger based on satellite-based vegetation indices. So satellite imagery captures the vegetation cover, and when the index be beyond a certain level, it triggers payouts. However, the challenge with this is that satellite indices can sometimes pick up non-edible vegetation, leading to inaccurate assessment of actual forage availability. But also, it doesn't capture quality of the forage. So when you pair the satellite image with actual measurements from the cow, that can serve as a better estimation of the risk that the farmer is having. So animal measurements on livestock conditions provides a clearer reflection of animal well-being during forage scarcity. Combining satellite vegetation indices with direct animal measurements can offer a more comprehensive and accurate approach to assessing forage scarcity and livestock health, leading to better targeted insurance payouts. So in conclusion, this study is the first in sub-Saharan Africa and an important stepping stone to evaluate individual cattle hardgut trait profiles as a resilience indicator for breeding and management. The results suggest that hardgut variability could serve as a valuable indicator and a resilience indicator in smallholder systems or smallholder farms. Hardgut measurement is a practical and scalable approach for smallholder farmers and even pastoralists to monitor livestock performance and cope as climate variability increases. Taking direct animal measurements using tapes and charts can enhance the accuracy and fairness of index-based livestock insurance by providing a more direct and specific measure of livestock condition and health. So future directions, further research using larger data sets to refine parameters and develop this very important decision-making tools for farmers in our setting will happen. And that's what we're going to do next. And so at this point, I just want to acknowledge all our numerous partners and funders and the farmers. And also I want to say thank you to the Highlander Lab for the invitation and to all of you for listening to my presentation. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Do we have anyone who wants to start off our questions? Yes, Audrey.
It was a very interesting talk. Normally, body condition has been used previously here as an indicator of animal condition. I hear you talking from animals from 0 to 36 months.
Yeah.
And the heart gets obviously when the animals grow, they will be different.
Yes.
And my question is it in terms of you linking it with satellite, does it tell us the feed or the management structures within the different breeds? Because you've got lots of heads, isn't it, that you are measuring in different breeds. Is this uniform across breeds? How does it correlate with body condition? To say the animal has got fat or no fat, or thin or not thin, or
So I think the challenge is with the subjectivity of the body condition scoring. But with the tape, that's a measure that is objective. And providing, so what we're proposing to do is to provide a chart with the tape, which is what is missing. Farmers will probably have a tape, but no way to chart that growth. So the deviation of your livestock from even your own chart, not talk of the population. If a farmer is charting, you know, what you can't measure, you can improve. As soon as they start to put it to paper and begin to put those crosses on a chart, they can see that their animals are growing, but they can also see that they're losing condition. And at a certain point, they decide, well, I don't have enough vegetation to keep this number of animals, and begin to destock. So it is what we've done here is to provide that additional tool, which is a chart, for them to put that number on for informed decision making. But yes, body condition scoring is used, but for insurance purposes, we would need to have more objective way of, payouts. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes, maybe I missed it at the start. Were these mainly dairy cattle, or was it pastoralist?
No, this is dairy cattle.
So this is European
crosses, yeah. Although we try to adjust for that in the model, the breed differences, but yes, they're dairy cattle. And if we're going to do it elsewhere, of course, we have to take measurements in that population and do the analysis and establish their own charts for them. Yeah.
Because sort of, is there a risk that what you're capturing is whether they were being well managed and the farmer was wealthy enough to buy food, because, or do you control for that, whether
yes.
they were feeding supplements, etc.? Because it's obviously slightly different to pastures where
everybody is
what the
yeah.
grazing is, which you can measure by satellite. But if they're more smallholder and they're cutting and carrying, or they're able to purchase hay from other areas where there's less drought or something, how do you account for that in your model?
That's interesting. Yeah, so we've adjusted based on whatever data that we have. So maybe we can also, yeah, that's interesting. I see what you mean with a smallholder, but we've controlled for breed types, we've controlled for the year of measurement and everything else that we could capture. Yeah. Nice, yeah.
Jeff online, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Sure, thanks. Hi, Chinyere. Sorry, I'm just across the road, but my last meeting overran, so I didn't have time to sprint over. Um, maybe you explain this, and apologies if I missed it. Just wondering about how you sort of calibrate or adjust the heart girth measurements to account for variation in the stature of animals, because you could be dealing with very big animals that are very thin, but by virtue of being taller overall, they have a high heart girth circumference, which might appear to mean they're in good condition, whereas the converse is true as well. Is there some sort of scaling for overall stature, or is it the intra-animal variation you're looking at anyway, which is less susceptible to that sort of issue?
So it was just we control for breed differences. I don't know if that would, yeah, that should capture some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's all that we did, because that's the data that we have is to control for breed differences. Yeah.
So is it variation within animals or between animals that's most important in your analysis?
Within
animals. Okay, so
yeah.
maybe less of an issue anyway. Yeah. Thanks.
You choose splines to model the growth curves.
Sorry?
You use the splines to model the growth curves. How is the model that you use for modeling the actual growth in this population is affecting your results? And do you think when you will have larger data that maybe you will need to have a different model to model the growth?
Yeah, it's just that could be it. Yeah. So we can look at other ways to model the growth as well. But this was just an initial look at the data, and this was what the GAM, that we used. But yes, we can use other and see what happens with the results. Yeah.
Thanks so much, and thanks for the good presentation. My question is on your definition of resilience and how that's relating to the growth as an indicator of that resilience. So if I take you back to human beings, under 5 babies, at least in Malawi where I grew up, they are weighed every 2 weeks or every month, and then they are plotting the growth curve. That makes sense because in a way, it's the sigmoid shape of that growth curve that is captured. Now, would we start saying children who are bouncing back onto the normal are the more resilient, or those that are not changing at all? So in this case, when you look at the heart curve as your indicator of growth, how are you relating that as an indicator
of resilience? Yeah.
How are you relating that to resilience itself?
So the relationship is how close the measure is to the predicted line. How close that particular, because the idea is that resilient animals will not be too disturbed by the stresses and will continue to grow regardless, better than animals that are not resilient. So the definition here is that a resilient animal will not deviate too much from the predicted growth, its own predicted growth curve, but a non-resilient animal will have a higher deviation from that. So that's how we have. So that's why we use the residual standard deviation, is how each measure has deviated from the predicted curve.
All right. Is that reflecting the biology of the animal, or rather the management?
It can also be in the biology of an animal. Yeah, and it's the same even with the milk. It's the same. It's the variation from the predicted lactation curve. The cows that are resilient will not be they will be disturbed. It's not like they're not, but their deviation from their predicted lactation curve will not be as that of an animal that is not resilient and is just very, very much impacted by the stress. So it's the deviation from the predicted curve that we're looking at here as a measure of resilience.
If you look at the population curve,
Yeah,
other individual animals,
on the population curve.
yes, but you don't have for each animal their own growth curve model.
We do. So I should.
Okay,
So that's a population. And this is for each individual animal, this one. So this first animals, the first one, it deviates, but not too much like the second animal. So that's what we're measuring there. Yeah.
So also a follow-up to the next question. I think it would be useful to give a definition of resilience at the beginning of your presentation, because I also noticed the word, the term stability has also been mentioned, which is a different thing. Yield stability. Yield stable animals are those which show less phenotypic plasticity or less variability, which has also genetic basis, but resilience is coming back after shock to normal or bouncing back. So you have this.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I know. Thank you for that. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. So there's several definitions of resilience. So one is bouncing back from a disturbance, but in this case is the deviation from your. It's not really about. Okay, it's still the same, but it's just as the animal is growing, and this is let me read from here. I said that the premise is that cattle is constantly exposed to unpredictable disturbances. So there is variation in that measure. So the cows that exhibit fewer fluctuations will be termed more resilient. So as they're growing, as you have that growth curve, when you look at each point, how it's far from the predicted line. If it's very far, then it's really responding to the disturbances and it's not resilient. But if it's not too far, like here, these two lines here, this animal is also going back and forth, but not as much as this animal. So I guess I'll have to find a better way of defining resilience when I start or when I have to make this presentation next time. Thank you.
Direction of deviation, does it matter? Because like if I'm growing better than anything and I have with a higher deviation, is that okay, or is you still penalize the animals that have the potential to grow better?
But your growth curve will pick.
Yeah, like in that case, you put animals, the points are above the projected, and some can be above or below. I'm just saying, which direction of travel are you saying? Are you penalizing animals that have got better genetic potential because they deviated from your care,
projected,
which may be a technical definition of that?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
A question in the front here?
Yeah, hi, thanks so much for the presentation. On this discussion, I work in sort of poverty area, and there's a lot of discussion in there around resilience and how you have to make normative assessments. Sort of our positive deviants are a little bit better than the negative deviants. We have to talk about how there's certain thresholds that we want animals or humans to meet. So that might be worthwhile reading. But I had a question. What is that? I just don't know the science. But what is the evidence of within animal variation for heart, girth, and animal condition? Is there a lot of evidence around that?
I haven't seen a lot, no.
But you're interpreting this as some sort of indicator of animal health, right?
Well, it's emerging. It's emerging. So there's a study from Australia. They've done similar work in beef cattle herds, where it's the growth curve, and then the deviation around that is what they're looking at as resilient or not resilient. Yeah. So the study around resilience is really emerging, but at least I know from the literature is the one around weights. There's lots around milk, yeah, but the one around weights and in beef cattle is also around the growth trajectory, what the predicted curve and how the animal is deviating from that. Yeah.
I had a question. So can you talk to us a bit about how a new trait like heart girth would be introduced? Like, do you coordinate with like different countries, or because it's over quite a wide, you work with quite a few different countries?
So it's already happening.
Yeah.
It's just not used in this way.
Okay.
We're already taking heart-gut measurements.
Yeah.
And usually, because these are calibrated to weight, so they tend to read up the weights, which is not well defined for those populations anyway. So this is just to say, well, maybe we shouldn't be looking at the weights, but just look at the actual measurements, because well, the weights they're not for those systems. So they're already capturing this data. It's just the way to use it is what we have to introduce.
Right.
But that would usually be with the extension officers or the enumerators that interact with the farmers.
And so far, do you have any feeling of what farmers feel about?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can even say like just was it anecdotal? You sure? Yeah. So we were going to Kapiti, and the farmer was the driver. We didn't know he was a farmer, but he was asking what we're going to do. And we said, well, we're going to, we're trying to produce a chart for animals, how they grow. And interestingly, in humans, they have the same. And in Kenya, they call it the purple book, where if you have a baby, they give you the chart and you chart the baby's growth. So he could relate already. He says, okay, I can also do that for my cows, and I can tell that they're growing well or not. And he was excited about it. So I think as long as it matters to the farmer, as long as they see the why, it's something, and it's simple, it's easy to do. It's just a tape around the cow. Yeah.
Oh, great, thanks.
But are not some of the animals that you would classify by your study as a non-resilient animals? Aren't they maybe very good animals? For example, the animal on your second picture, right? I assume it's feeding or we don't know, it can be confounded with other factors, right? You adjust it kind of for those using your fixed effects. But that animals are the same. It deviated more upward from the predicted curve. So that means that animal
but then
is exceptional.
Well, yeah, but it was on this for a long time. Like it was, I don't know, but it was on the same, what you had got for about 3 months or 4 months.
But it's above the predicted.
It's always what you predicted.
Prediction, so it's okay. It should be fine.
It's a good animal.
Yeah. Sorry, do we have any questions?
Okay.
No,
Go ahead. Yeah. Just to say that, with this is really preliminary, and the challenge in the system is not having enough data points. So if we could follow an animal from birth to 36 months, it would tell a better story than if you're picking like 8 measures across a whole period of, which is what we have in our system. So the idea is that we'll reiterate and see how we can make this better, but it has potential for use in our system.
And also the comments made by Mark there that these guys, they are all doing cut and carry. So you may be reflecting the ability of the farmer to feed the animals rather than the animal's potential itself.
Yeah, we have that data. We can also include that somehow in our model. Yeah.
You need that one.
Yeah.
That will account for how much the guy was bringing in.
Cut and carry, yeah.
But you had a herd effect in the morning.
I did, yeah.
Yeah,
but it's more.
Can you say something about the stiffness of the spline? You can imagine that if you made it more wobbly, it fits better to the data. And is there a way how do you choose somehow how stiff to make?
I used 3 nuts when I was fitting it, because if you went the model complained if I went more or less. So I just went by that when I was fitting the model. Yeah.
I would like to ask a question outside of your presentation, just because I benefit from knowing that you are working with the African Dairy Genetic Gains Program, the ADGG now, African Asia Dairy Genetic Gains Program. In there, you're measuring a lot of things, including heat stress and all that. How are you linking these traits in the program? Are you also thinking of temperature humidity index to get into your resilience model other than just the feeding, as an example? How are you linking all these other traits and measurements that you're taking?
So the idea is to have a selection index. That's what we're working towards. So yeah, right now it's milk and body weight in our model, but we've also worked on THI, using THI as a measure for heat tolerance, and that's also included in that will be included in the model. We're also measuring emissions, so it's just one step at a time, but the idea is to select on an index. Yeah, build a selection index for selection.
I can maybe just say to that, because we've got GPS locations for the animals, we can link it to weather data sets, which enables.
Yeah, so the THI, so for the THI analysis, for the THI analysis, we use the latitude and the longitude to extract the weather data, and then we correlated that with the milk production. So for the THI analysis, it was milk we're looking at, and see what happens as the threshold for heat increases, and because the production was dropping, it drops, yeah. So the idea is to include all of that into the selection.
All right. So at the end of the day, this is only 1, 2 in a toolbox.
Yes.
For the African resilient
animal
and cotton crop.
Yeah.
Dairy cow.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So with that, I would like to thank Chinyere again for being here with us today and answering all of our questions. And thank you everyone for joining us. One last round of applause.